Hello. Well, I was surprised by the surprising number of comments that I got on my piece about TERFs. For those who didn't see the earlier one, TERFs are trans-exclusionary radical feminists. Sorry, I have trouble remembering all of this. It means they exclude trans people from whatever dialogue they're having. And one person in particular took me to task for not treating the riot in Hyde Park seriously enough. Okay, first, I have to say in my own defence that at one point I do say that the situation could have been dangerous, although I admit that was very short and, practically an aside really, and I was helpless with laughter at the time. So I appreciate I wasn't approaching the dangers of the situation with anything like the serious concern which I might have demonstrated in other circumstances. And it's a reasonable question. So I'm going to try to answer it. Why didn't I take the smacking around of a 60-year-old purple-haired woman a bit more seriously? I think maybe the answer's in my description, really. Well, actually, the answer is that both sides are ridiculous and there's just no getting around that. What was going on? It starts with a group of feminists looking at a situation in which there are fully functioning men with all the bits, dyeing their hair green, wearing leggings and dark maroon lipstick. I don't know why, but they seem to have a real taste for maroon lipstick, and probably nose rings and various piercings, and thereby insisting that this makes them women. And also, I have to say, getting pretty snippy when somebody contradicts them and points out the obvious, well, it should be obvious, a little point that there are one or two small items that set them apart. The feminists, on the other hand, pejoratively called the TERFs, say these people are men. For all their green hair, and that they have no claim to womanhood, and more specifically, they shouldn't be regarded as women when it comes to use of places like public toilets and changing rooms. And I'm with them on that one, absolutely. I had a huge falling out with a friend on Facebook about that, actually. I haven't heard from him for a while. I think maybe he might have defriended me. And I'm even more with them when these purple-haired indeterminates get a testosterone surge and start exhibiting extremes of masculine aggression against the women who do not accept their femininity. Most men have huge amounts of testosterone swirling about in their system, and it must be pretty awful for them a lot of the time. Never having been a man, I don't know how difficult that may be, but I'm prepared to imagine that occasionally it must require a degree of self-discipline which perhaps many women don't understand. However, some men don't manage to exhibit any self-discipline, and among them seem to be these guys who call themselves trans activists and who display some quite alarmingly unladylike behaviour. They actually seem to be on the lookout for women to push around. Anyway, that's them. So why am I not more sympathetic to the women who were the victims of that particular dust-up in Hyde Park? Well, because I find them not much more prepossessing than their opponents, quite frankly. Let's take an example. One of the demonstrators describes herself as a lesbian feminist. she's a feminist. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm a feminist too. What gets me is her self-definition as a lesbian feminist. This is where she loses my sympathy. Not because she has a sexual preference for women, but because she insists on me knowing that. Well, why should I know? What's the point? Of what possible value might it be for me to be aware of what turns her on? Of what relevance is it to my acceptance or rejection of her opinions? Well, it's obvious she thinks that because she's a lesbian, she therefore has some special tag on what she thinks. I beg to differ. So these feminists concerned about the problems about which I am also concerned, in situations like gyms and swimming pools, instead of making common cause with people, for the sake of argument, I'm using the word people as a general definition for human beings. Instead of making common cause with people to discuss these issues, they have separated themselves out into their own little group of radicals, excluding others and thereby weakening the cause, which they say they see as important. I also see it as important, but I wouldn't go to one of their meetings for all the tea in China. This is what they've done. They've split the vote on the issue and made it impossible properly to discuss it. For that reason, I'm inclined to the opinion that they actually don't want discussion about their concerns. It's sort of like they just love the feeling of being in an excluded group, fighting the forces of evil or whatever, and they aren't particularly interested in solving the problem that they see. It interests me that groups like that tend also to have a set basket of political opinions, generally tending towards an extreme form of socialism, which again I find ridiculous, dangerous and stupid. That's my personal political opinions. And but I find them typical of a sort of collectivist mentality which concentrates on outrage about obstacles rather than discourse about alternative routes. They prefer to take offence rather than give somebody the benefit of the doubt. They prefer to be aggressive rather than conciliatory. And worst of all, they prefer domination to democracy. And it's my belief that they don't really care about the issue in any other way than that it increases their particular and narrow and exclusionary definition of their particular brand of what they like to define as sisterhood, and what I think of as the derangement of the herd.